Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into project management contracts.
Right. We've looked through the material to kind of pull out the essentials for you.
Exactly. So, your mission really is to quickly get the differences between the main contract types. See how they fit different projects.
Yeah, and we're focusing on three big categories from the source material: fixed price, cost reimbursable, and time and materials.
Think of it as your quick guide.
Pretty much a rapid rundown.
Okay, so let's start with fixed price contracts. The core idea is the price is agreed upfront, right? Locked in.
That's the gist of it. Price is set. Now, there are a few flavors here. First up is firm fixed price, FFP.
FFP, okay.
One price, that's it.
Yeah.
Costs go up, the seller absorbs that. So they carry, well, most of the risk.
Makes sense. So FFP is best when the scope is really clear, totally defined.
Absolutely, if you know exactly what needs doing.
Got it. Then you mentioned fixed price incentive fee, FPIF.
Right, FPIF. Still a fixed price base, but there are incentives, bonuses, basically.
Bonuses for what? Like finishing early or under budget?
Exactly. Meeting certain targets, costs, time, maybe quality.
Yeah.
So the risk is shared a bit more, but still leans heavily on the seller.
Okay, so you'd use FPIF when you want to really motivate that extra bit of performance.
Precisely. When a performance bonus makes sense.
And the last fixed price one, FPEA.
Fixed price with economic adjustment, FPEA. This one's key for, longer projects.
Ah, right, because of things like inflation.
Exactly. It allows for price adjustments based on agreed-upon economic factors. But even with that adjustment, the seller still holds the main risk.
So the common thread for all fixed price types is risk transfer to the seller.
That's the big picture, yeah.
Yeah.
Shifting that financial uncertainty.
Okay, let's switch gears then. Cost-reimbursable contracts. Sounds like the opposite approach.
It really is quite different. Here, the buyer agrees to pay the seller's actual legitimate costs for doing the work. Plus, there's a fee on top that's the seller's profit.
So the buyer's paying actual costs. That means the buyer takes on more financial risk.
Definitely. The risk landscape shifts significantly towards the buyer.
Okay, so what are the variations here?
Well, first is cost plus fixed fee, or CPFF.
CBFF.
Buyer pays all the allowable costs, and the fee, the profit part, is a fixed amount decided up front. It doesn't change based on how the project costs turn out.
So the seller gets their profit regardless.
Pretty much. Which means the buyer carries, well, almost all the cost risk.
When would you use that? Seems risky for the buyer.
It's best for situations with high uncertainty. Think research and development, R&D, where the scope or even the final outcome is really hard to pin down at the start.
Okay. Then cost plus incentive fee, CPIF. Sounds familiar.
Yes. It's the cost-based cousin of FPIF.
Yeah.
Buyer pays the cost, but there's an incentive fee tied to performance goals.
Like keeping costs down.
Exactly. Cost control is a big one here. So risk is shared because both sides benefit from efficiency, but the buyer still carries more risk overall because they're covering the base costs.
Right. Use this when you want some cost control, but the scope is still a bit fuzzy.
You got it. And finally, there's cost plus award fee, CPAF.
Award fee. How does that work?
So the buyer pays costs, and the award fee is decided later based on the buyer's subjective judgment of the quality or performance.
Subjective. Wow.
Yeah, it's not tied to objective metrics like CPIF. It's more about how satisfied the buyer is. Naturally, the buyer carries the most risk here, too.
Okay, so CPAF is for when quality is absolutely top priority, but maybe hard to define objectively up front.
That's the sweet spot for it. The main point for all cost reimbursable is the buyer absorbing more risk.
Makes sense. So that leaves time and materials. T&M. You said this was a kind of hybrid.
Yeah, it borrows a bit from both worlds. It's like fixed price because you agree on fixed rates, say, per hour or per day for labor.
Okay, like a rate card.
Right, but it's also like cost reimbursable because the buyer pays for the actual time spent plus the actual cost of any materials used.
So the total cost isn't fixed up front.
Nope. It depends entirely on how long it takes and what materials are needed.
Which means the risk falls mainly on the buyer again.
Primarily, yes. If the work takes longer than estimated, the buyer pays more. There's often a not-to-exceed clause put in, but the fundamental risk sits with the buyer.
When does T&M make sense then?
It's often used for urgent needs where you can't define scope quickly, or staff augmentation, small tasks, short-term things where flexibility is key.
Got it. Quick jobs, unclear scope, need people fast.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the risk allocation based on everything we've discussed. Fixed price contracts,
Seller carries more risk.
cost reimbursable contract,
Buyer carries more risk.
and time and material.
Also, buyer carries more risk, generally speaking.
Right. That seems to be the absolute key takeaway here. Different contracts mean different risk profiles for buyer and seller.
Understanding that allocation is fundamental to making the right choice.
So for you listening, hopefully this gives you a much clearer picture of these core contract types and critically how they differ.
And maybe leaves you with something to think about. Given that almost every project has some level of uncertainty, how should that uncertainty really shape your choice of contract?
Yeah, how do those unknowns influence who should logically carry the financial weight? Something to mull over for the situations you encounter.